Hi, and welcome to the show. I'm Peggy Sue Skipper, and I'm very pleased today to have with me City of Sacramento Council Member Steve Cohn, District 3. Welcome.
Well, my pleasure to be here.
Well, tell me as a council member what your duties are. What is it you actually do? I think a lot of people out there don't really understand what City Council does.
Well, you know, it varies day to day, but basically we're making the major policy decisions for City of Sacramento, which is a growing city, so there's a lot going on, a lot of development issues certainly. So when it comes to making decisions on zoning and approving land use applications. We approve the budget, obviously, for our city and oversee all the departments, you know, police, fire, parks, libraries, all those different things that make up a city.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff, and it's become really a full-time job, although other than the mayor, the other council members do tend to still have other jobs.
Okay, so that means you have two full-time jobs.
Yeah, basically, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you see? I mean, Sacramento is in a growth mode right now, sort of and really a pretty fast-track growth mode, it feels like, from all the people that I've been talking to throughout this series. What do you see happening over the next 5 years, the high points?
Well, Sacramento is growing very rapidly. We're going from a city of less than 1 million when you talk about the region just 20 years ago to well over 2 million now, and we'll be over 3 million within the next 20 years. When we talk about the next 5 years, we're seeing a dramatic change in our downtown, where we're seeing people actually come to live downtown in our central city, and that's really changing things because it's become a much livelier place, restaurants and that kind of thing, retail. But we're also going to see some negatives in terms of traffic throughout the region because it's just keeps getting more and more congested as we grow.
Right. But as that downtown revitalization happens, which is a phenomenon happening all across the country,
absolutely,
in many cities, but some of the traffic will be abated if people start living, working, and playing in that confined area, I would think.
Right. Well, that's our plan, and actually we've come together as a region with what we call a blueprint that tries to take advantage of that very concept. And people use the term smart growth. Of course, who would ever be in favor of dumb growth?
Right.
But
let's vote for that one.
Yeah, exactly. But really, the idea is to try to get people to make better use of transit, to build in a way where you can sometimes walk or take a bike to get from one location to another without having to get into your car. And the way cities were built over the last 50 years, unfortunately, everything was separated out. You park your car at your office, you want to go get lunch, you got to drive, and you want to go shopping, you drive somewhere else. The whole idea of a downtown, and even when we're talking about neighborhoods that might have business districts too, they may not be the big downtown, but where you could park your car and walk from one place to another, and even be able to take transit from where you live, and that's really our goal.
Okay, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And as we see gas prices rise, and as we see gas supplies get more and more critical, which they will.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't think anybody can really argue that anymore. We have to find alternative things to do to get around.
Absolutely.
And to live.
That's right.
And I think we will see people start looking at more closed-in communities in a way where things are accessible.
Right.
Closer.
Well, I'll give you another example. Here in Northern California, you can think of the greater Northern California as a region too, Sacramento to San Francisco. That corridor now has the most rail ridership of any corridor outside the Northeast. So we are really seeing tremendous growth in people riding trains. And of course, if they're riding trains, then once they get to their destination, they're typically not going to be using a car. So we're starting to see that more and more. Certainly back east, you've seen it for a long time. Absolutely. In Europe, but now we're starting to see it even in California.
There are very few places, I believe this, outside of New York City in the United States, where people can actually exist, or do actually exist for a large part, without vehicles.
But it's growing. My
is.
daughter, for example, she lives here in Sacramento, doesn't drive a car.
Oh,
she has a license, but she
How old is
chooses
she?
not. 24.
Really?
Yeah, and
Okay.
gets around, so
Well, there
it
you
can
go.
be done even here.
Well, and I think that the younger generation is going to make this happen. I mean,
Right.
let's face it, our generation and the ones before us, we're married to those vehicles.
Right.
We grew up believing we have a right to have an automobile
Right.
and use it indiscriminately. Well, we're having to look at that now.
Absolutely, but even for a lot of us, we don't necessarily have to have 2 or 3 cars per family.
Right.
And there are times when, of course, most of us want to have a car, but you might choose not to use it all the time. And we're starting to see a lot of empty nesters who are coming back into the city where they can have kind of a nice urban lifestyle, be able to go out to dinner just walking from where they live, and especially if somebody's not really into gardening. Now,
Right.
people that are into gardening obviously want to have that, but
Those
we're
who don't
starting.
want to do the yard work.
No, we're seeing a lot more of that right now.
And I think the young people like the downtown vibrant
Sure.
atmosphere. And I don't know if, I'd be curious to know, has city councils talked anything about this, another phenomenon that's going on in the United States, and that's attracting the young, bright people that are the workforce of today and tomorrow.
Right.
There are certain things that attract that workforce
Yes.
that are different than what attracted the workforces previously.
No question about it, and I don't think in the past Sacramento has been quite as successful at doing that as some cities. There's sort of this cool factor, if you will, that young people are attracted to, and I think Sacramento is getting that, and we are seeing that more and more. The issue we have, quite frankly, is that being in California, housing is very expensive,
Right.
and Sacramento used to be fairly inexpensive compared to San Francisco, Los Angeles. What we're seeing, unfortunately, is it's gotten so expensive, it's hard for younger people to buy places, but the market is cooling, so maybe that buyer's market will help those young people.
Right. Well, and that's a double-edged sword either way you go,
Right,
right? Because
that's right.
people want their property values to go up.
Exactly.
But people need to live somewhere too. Affordable housing
Well,
is a huge issue for a lot of cities.
Absolutely, and a lot of times people think of it like we're just talking for people on welfare.
Right.
What they need to recognize is that concept goes to police officers, teachers, clerks that work in stores, hairdressers. It's not. We're not just talking about poor people. We're talking about working people as well.
Working middle class.
Exactly.
Not even lower class, working middle class. And
Exactly.
these are the people that provide the services.
Absolutely.
And goodness knows teachers are important, firemen are important, police
Right.
officers are important. You can't have a community without those.
No, you wouldn't want to live in such a community.
And if you're going to attract new businesses, which is also a part of any developing community, then you have to have good schools, you have to have a good police department, fire department, you have to have that infrastructure so that they know that their employees are going to have a good life.
Exactly, and traditionally the way Western cities particularly have tried to address that is just keep growing out and further out.
Right.
So the
Annex,
housing,
right?
and just the suburban growth just continue to sprawl. And unfortunately, that's not sustainable. And so a lot of the housing for the future is going to be more higher density product, condominiums, and even to some extent high rises in the central part of town.
Right. And I think we're seeing too a lot of people, and especially these baby boomers that we're talking about, they're thinking, you know, I don't need 4,000 square feet in my house.
Right.
It's the two of us now. I don't want to keep
That's
up with
right.
it. I don't want the kids moving home.
Right.
I get one small guest room that's
Right.
not too comfortable or something,
Right.
you know, whatever. But I think
Right.
we'll see more and more of that as well.
Yes.
So it's going to be an interesting shift in dynamics, I think. For
It
many
is,
cities.
and it mirrors, as you suggest, the size of the households we're seeing. The average number of people in households throughout the country is much lower than it was 20 or 40 years ago, and certainly Sacramento is no exception.
Yeah. But then we do have that issue of really it is a shrinking workforce, right? From the baby boomers retiring and the
Right.
people that are, but what we have, and hopefully this will somehow even out, we have an increasing automation technology.
Right.
So hopefully those balance out at some point.
Yes, it does tend to balance out, of course, but there's always transitional issues and people who are trained to do one thing and then technology passes them by and they have to be retrained. And so that gets to the issue of education and training in the workforce where you have to continually be looking at that issue, and people need to think sometimes about their education even later in life, not just as a teenager out of high school.
What do you see as some of the primary concerns there? We've only got about a minute left, so we may have
Okay.
to take a break and then come back.
Well, traffic is always a big issue, not just the people that live in the district, but also people who are commuting through the district. We have some of the most beautiful older neighborhoods in all of Northern California, which by definition means all of California,
Yeah.
since Northern California is so nice. But traffic is always a big issue in our community.
Okay. So are there alternative transportation plans that are coming in the next 5-10 years that maybe alleviate some of that?
Well, or at least mitigate, let's put it that way. Yes, light rail is being expanded, for example, down to our rail station downtown, which should give for a better connection with other forms of transit as well, including the Capitol Corridor Rail. But no question, traffic will continue to be an issue, even with the additional transit use.
Right. Of course, then it becomes sort of becomes our responsibility as citizens to look at how we can help solve that issue.
I agree.
You know, city government can't do it for us. You know,
That's-
they can do some things, but we
Right.
have to, as citizens of the world, wake up and say, maybe we need to look at changing our lifestyles a little bit, which reduces the smog, reduces the traffic, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I agree, and you have to think globally and act locally, as they say. And Voltaire had a different way of saying it. Each person must cultivate their own garden, and we do share that responsibility collectively.
Okay, we've got to take a break. We'll
All
be
right.
back. Stick with us. I'm Peggy C. Skipper. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Peggy Sue Skipper, and I'm back with Steve Cohn, who is City Council Member District 3 for City of Sacramento. Welcome back, Steve.
My pleasure.
Now, we were talking about growth and smart growth as opposed to dumb growth, or maybe we should say as opposed to unconscious growth.
Right.
Okay, so we're looking at conscious growth for the community.
Right.
And I think that's segues beautifully into what we need to look at as far as energy.
Right.
You know, how are we going to power the things that we do today and into the future?
Right.
And I understand that's kind of your bailiwick.
Well, that's right. In addition to being on the city council, I work for.
Oh,
Whoa.
sorry.
Gesundheit. I work for the electric utility here in Sacramento called SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. So we're dealing with that issue both short and long term.
Okay. Well, tell me what you're dealing with. What are you seeing out there? I mean, energy is a huge issue globally.
Absolutely.
But again, it's a local issue as well.
It is. We're affected by oil markets, obviously, when you look at internationally, and the transportation sector is particularly affected by oil markets. But the electricity sector has a lot of different sources, gas, as well as, of course, renewables that people are hoping will be more prevalent, whether we're talking about solar, wind, biomass, and other types of sources. And we're even hearing much more about biomass for transportation as well as a way to create fuel.
Okay, when you say biomass, are you talking like biodiesel?
Well, it can be, biomass really can be any kind of organic plant that's converted into a fuel. For purposes of a car, usually you hear about corn being
The ethanol
the
type.
ethanol.
Yeah.
For purposes of a power plant, actually it can be rice straw. For example, here in Sacramento, in the Central Valley, we grow a lot of rice. In fact, one of the largest sources on earth. Rice straw can actually be an excellent source of ethanol for fuel in cars as well as for power plants.
Okay. Interesting. So that could actually have a very positive effect on the agriculture in the area.
Absolutely. It can give another source of revenue. It also can have a very positive effect on air quality, because one of the issues with power production is it's not just a question of producing it any which way and it's sort of fungible. It actually makes a difference whether you produce power in a way that pollutes the air or in a way that doesn't. Sure. And so those are always major issues. And of course how we use it too, because in the past we've tended to be very, very wasteful.
Right.
And we really need to be more conscious about how to use energy more efficiently. And that does tie back even to the land use issues, because if we grow in a way that's very inefficient, it takes more power and energy to serve those needs.
Sure. So there, it's sort of like we were talking about with the automobiles.
Right.
We as a society in America have become so used to using our cars anytime, anywhere, for any
Right.
reason. And, you know, one of the few countries in the world that do that.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
Europe has been paying premium prices for petrol and gasoline
Right.
for years.
That's right.
And the United States is just kind of spoiled when it comes to that.
We also have greater distances, which has made it less popular, I would say, to advocate any kind of tax. When it comes to power production in terms of electricity, part of the problem too is that if you are wasteful in how you produce it, you're having to rely on sources that can become very expensive and very polluting. So the more efficient we can be in terms of our use, the more we can concentrate on sources that are better for our environment and actually cost less as well.
So it really does come back to personal responsibility for every citizen.
I think it does, and being better educated about what the whole situation is. Here in Sacramento, we're actually very lucky because we have plentiful sunshine. So solar is obviously something that, as the technology improves, will work very well here. We have sun 3/4 to 80% of the year full sunshine. We also have wind, very close to our area. Between Sacramento and the Bay Area is one of the best areas for wind. And right now, SMUD is in the process of tripling the size of our wind farm, we call it, from about 40 megawatts to over 100. And that's a serious amount of power because each megawatt can serve almost 1,000 people.
Wow.
So when you talk 100 megawatts of wind, you're talking 100,000 people. So it's a very large source of power.
Okay. Well, I love the concept of solar. I think of all the alternatives, it's one of the better choices for many, many areas.
Right.
It won't work everywhere maybe,
Right.
but eventually it might, even with very little sunshine.
Right.
And what you said about the technology is true, but I also know necessity is in mother of invention, is that the way it goes? And if we start putting our dollars into something, then the technology will get there.
I agree, and we've tended to put our money into oil and gas overall, and used to be nuclear. Now that's something people haven't talked a lot about,
Right.
but they are starting to talk about a little bit more because of global warming
Right.
and climate change, and we do need to put more money into some of these renewables in particular to ensure technology will improve.
Right. And nuclear, that's the word, frightens people.
Right.
But it is being used very effectively in countries.
It
France
is.
has been doing it for a while.
France in particular, Sweden, some other European countries, Japan. The problem in this country, we never figured out what to do with the waste. And until we have a full cycle where we know not just how we're producing the nuclear
Right.
power, but what we do with the waste products when they're done, it's not a very viable technology. But I do think eventually we're going to hear more about that because global warming is a huge issue, and nuclear actually avoids the carbon production that causes global warming. So I'm sure it's something we're going to hear about. But in California, it's very controversial. Sacramento in particular, we were the first utility in the entire country to shut down an operating nuclear plant by vote of the people. So so you have a history here where
Right.
people said no to nuclear. Of course, part of the problem was it was a very inefficient design, the same design as 3 Mile Island, and
Right.
was offline a lot, and people were worried about the safety. So there were a lot of issues there, but I do think Sacramento probably will not be on the forefront of the next nuclear wave.
Okay. They're going to wait and see, right?
We'll wait and see
Right.
what happens, right?
Okay. Well, there again, and I don't know, is there waste with solar? I guess the batteries that you have to have.
Well, there's
could
no
become-
waste with the when it's producing, but the waste just comes in when you're producing the technology itself, the manufacturing process for the photovoltaic cells and so on. There's also solar technology that can be used more like a power plant where you boil water through solar arrays, solar mirrors that concentrate the heat on water, more like a traditional power plant. And there you do have some inefficiencies like any power plant. Photovoltaic, though, which are the kind of solar you may see on rooftops,
Right.
which look almost like roofing panels with little wires in them. That directly converts sunlight into power. So there's no waste at all there. It's just you have to manufacture the product.
Right. And you have to have the batteries.
Well, photovoltaic, you don't need the battery to if you're plugged into the grid, you could just get by without batteries, although you would need, when the sun's not shining, then you'd need
Right.
another source. The batteries come into play more, I think, with the transportation, where you have to be able to continue to run the vehicle, and fuel cells are being discussed, well, actually for power production as well, as sort of the next generation of batteries, much more efficient.
Well, and I tell people, if we put our money to it, they'll figure out how to make it happen and make it more efficient.
Right.
Because a computer that used to be in a warehouse is now on my cell phone.
That's right. That's
You know,
right.
so this can happen.
It can happen, and it will. It is happening. We tend to think it's happening slowly, but when you look at the efficiency of power production and even of cars, for example, compared to 50 years ago,
Oh,
and also a lot less polluting. I mean, I drive a hybrid, and when you're not when you stop or go less than 20 miles an hour, you're not polluting at all.
you're on electric, right?
You're on electric, and that's something that sounded 20 years ago like science fiction.
Right.
But it's actually here. People can buy these cars.
And I think that even the manufacturers of hybrid cars have been a little astonished at how well they're selling.
They are selling.
People
very,
are buying them.
and they really can't keep up with the demand yet. And of course, challenge will be to take that technology and then and use it in all the cars, really, which I think is what'll happen. I tend to think that right now we think of a hybrid car being separate from other cars,
Right.
but I think over time that technology will just be part of any car you buy.
And that goes right back to what we were talking about earlier. People are putting their dollars to it.
Yes,
So manufacturers will sit up and pay attention.
they do.
Like, this is what people are buying. We can't keep them in
Right.
stock. They're not buying the other ones.
That's right.
Maybe we better make more of them.
Yes.
You know?
Even before the government says you have
Well,
to
exactly.
do it.
And
Yeah.
that's one thing that irritates me the most when people say, well, government needs to take care of this, you
Yeah.
know, or city council needs to take care
Yeah.
of this. Well, we all have to responsibility
That's
for,
right.
for making these things happen.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
so we got about a minute left. What else would you like the community to know about what's going on in city council?
Well, we have, I think, an excellent opportunity right now for this city to live up to our goal, which is to be the most livable city in America. And to help us do that, we have a general plan that we're trying to update for the city, and it's on our website. And I really encourage people to participate and really take this opportunity and be part of the vision for what Sacramento should look like over the next 20 to 50 years.
It's kind of like, if you don't participate, don't gripe.
You got it.
Okay.
Although I hear plenty.
I bet you do.
Either way.
That's a hard one. People like to gripe, don't they? But anyway, Steve, I want to thank you so much.
My
It's been
pleasure.
great. Sounds like some good things are going on. Sacramento's a happening place.
It surely is. Exciting time to be here.
All right. Okay, so good place to live, Sacramento. I think it's going to get better and better, but it takes each citizen doing their part to make it a really sustainable environment. So go to the website, look and see what some of these options are, and do your part. I'm Peggy Sue Skipper. We'll see you next time.